in 2016, the Democratic National Congress and its candidate for the U.S. presidential election, Senator Hillary Clinton, were accused of not devoting enough time and resource to the campaign for votes in some crucial black neighborhoods, and consequently paid dearly for it. When Donald Trump swept to power through an electoral college landslide, things have been different in this year's election, with former Vice President Joe Biden spending a large chunk of time in those areas as he tried to reconnect with a traditionally friendly constituency still hurting from the wounds inflicted by high-profile extrajudicial murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and a number of others. There's also a substantial sentiment being expressed in the black community of the United States that despite one of the occupying the White House for 8 years, the myriad of socio-economic challenges of the African American remain largely untouched. Will this situation have affected the way the community voted? What will be the shape of the race relations going forward? Joining us now is Logan Cashin, an African American who has spent more than 30 years living and working in Nigeria. His father, John Logan Cashin Jr., was an American dentist, civil rights campaigner, and politician, and founder and leader of the National Democratic Party of Alabama. He will be taking us on the myriad of socioeconomic challenges of the African American. Great to have you, John. It's a pleasure talking to you this morning. John, real quickly, I want you to talk to me about, the social dynamics of the African American. The African American society and community in general is quite divided during this election. Some are looking at the Biden side. Some are looking otherwise. I mean, a great case in point was Ice Cube. Ice Cube came out officially to support Donald Trump big time in this election. You had other black rappers come and support Donald Trump, people like 50 Cent and some other musicians like that in this election. What's the dynamics playing out as regards this with the black community and voting for, their candidates, either Biden or Trump?
Okay, well, Ice Cube, who I brought up with his contract with Black America last time I was interviewed with your station, he more so put himself out to bring a new platform for the Black American community. And he first talked to the Democrats. They didn't respond and pass saying, wait till after the election. And the Republicans responded and asked Mr. Trump basically to meet with Ice Cube. And they came to some consensus, and now we have the platinum platform of $500 billion. $500 billion is on the table to discuss of how to repair the black community and economics, et cetera. He originally said it wasn't an endorsement of Trump, but it was a good positive reaction for us. And that is the basis of how we need to go forward. Now, what's interesting is the person that he has assigned over HUD, Dr. Ben Carson, who in his own right as a neurosurgeon is world-renowned, but the success of the inner development of urban environments where mostly a lot of black populations still live and control Democratic-run cities, that is, to me, where the development has to happen more than anywhere else. It would be good that that particular department, Housing and Urban Development, is focused on going forward. I don't know if he's going to retain Ben Carson in that secretarial seat as we go forward, or there'll be further discussion. But to me, that's one of the lacking areas where if Trump is reelected, he has to focus on.
Well, John, I mean, I guess people have the right to make their choice, whether they are African American or they are Caucasian or they are Nigerian American. You as an American in diaspora, where do you stand? We know, of course, that the results are beginning to come in, and everybody is anxious. At some point, it will be Biden here, Trump there. But where do you stand? I don't know whether you voted, but who do you think is a better president for the United States at this point, and why?
Okay. I'll have to admit, being from a family that founded an independent party in Alabama in the 60s, because the Democrats or Dixiecrats wouldn't even allow blacks to sit in state conventions or be candidates on the ballot, we didn't really want to be Republicans in that time, so we founded our own party. Now, me coming up an independent thinking party, though it was titled National Democratic Party of Alabama, I have leaned toward an independent thinking as well as considering libertarian thinking, which is more constitutional. I've even served as a vice chair of the Libertarian Party in Harris County, Houston, Texas, when I was younger, living there. And they happen to have one U.S. rep now. They're forcing runoffs in Georgia in the senatorial races, and the mainstream media is not discussing it. Not that I'm endorsing fully the Libertarian Party, but I think we as an African-American community need to be thinking independently, locally, as to where is our energies politically, socially, and economically need to go. It shouldn't be one person from the top, meaning the president, who's basically supposed to be instructed by the House of Representatives, because all bills of tax and appropriations and revenue begin in the House of Reps, which is controlled by the Democrats and an 80-year-old Nancy Pelosi. Is that the future of our country? Should the Democrats retain the House? That's why I'm saying we need to think independently no matter where we are. There's a record number of Nigerians running for office in the United States. That hasn't been discussed too much, including U.S. House seats and local elections. To me, there needs to be a lot of focus on that because the highest educated immigration group into the United States now is the Nigerian population that's infusing into the United States of America. I hope I've begun to answer your concerned question there.
All right, John, I'd like to throw you a Molotov cocktail now by telling you that, sadly, like you think, by your sentiment, Nancy Pelosi will likely be the Speaker of the House because most networks are already calling it that the Democratic Party have won the House. What's your reaction to that?
I was just looking at that before we came on the air, and they've called 113 to 113, but it seems the Democrats should have a little edge in that vote. Nancy Pelosi has been a stalwart of the Democratic Party leadership for over a decade for sure. She's been Speaker multiple times. I was hoping there'd be a new breed emergence within the Democratic caucus or party to go forward, but I haven't heard anything new from that level, which is real important, especially if we still have a Republican president, a Republican Senate. It may not be after today or next week. It might be 50-50. We're not sure, but the House appears to be leaning Democratic. To me, that gridlock is what has to help everybody, or it's going to be the demise of going forward, because to me, there's too much filibustering activities going on in both parties. If Biden should win, he wants to pack the Supreme Court, which no one's tried since the 1940s. And playing politics with the courts, well, they're always political, but this election I predicted would be very volatile. And to me, between 2020 and 2024, I would like to see, I don't know if I've said it before, that the Electoral College is all elected district by district, not by candidates. Nebraska and Maine are going to have split votes, it appears. For sure, Biden will get one electoral vote in Nebraska. Obama carried one electoral vote twice in Nebraska, but it's still a red or Republican state. Something that hasn't been mentioned, we have 50-odd Congressional Black Caucus members in the House of Reps and the Senate, highest ever in history. Most of those are in urban communities. If we went to district by district voting in the Electoral College, black populations would control 50-odd electoral votes. And most presidential elections are decided in less than 20, 25, 30, 35 votes. And to me, that reform is the most important thing if you're talking about election reform. And I think there's going to be a tug of war over some of these constitutional issues going into the next 2024 and even midterm cycle. I'm not so sure what the reactions are going to be based on some of these absentee ballots or early voting ballots that are coming in. And some of these decisions will be court decisions over the next weeks, possibly up to when the electoral colleges meet in the various capitals in December, based on the 12th Amendment. These are some other things that are not really discussed, but I would like to see the legal and constitutional process take more afoot as we go forward.
Well, John, you live in Nigeria, and
yes.
I'm sure you are well aware of the fact that Nigerians and other Africans have taken a keen interest in this election in the United States. But some of what Nigerians have been saying, they've been saying that this year's election in the United States looks like a third world election. We have seen food being distributed. We have seen violence on the streets of San Francisco, New York, Denver, Colorado. And people say, well, with the way these Americans are behaving, maybe African governments or the African Union should issue a statement about the need to have a free and fair and civilized electoral process in the United States. And that perhaps travel advisory should also be given to Nigerians living in certain hotspots in the United States. When you hear things like that, how do you feel as an American who is interested in your country and who has lived in Nigeria for up to 30 years?
Well, back in the early 2000s, let's say the 2004 election, to me, most of the populace was asleep. When Obama was elected to the Senate that year, and he spoke at the Democratic National Convention, a lot of people had never heard of him. I'd been watching him because my sister was in law school with him, but a lot of people woke up since 2008. If, for example, 4 white males had run in the election of 2008, there would probably be an uproar about the black community about not having a possible nominee on the ticket. Now it's almost standard that you get somebody ethnic at the top tickets. We had Cynthia McKinney running on the Green Party also in 2008, somebody I know and kind of a political friend and actually supported in that election. Not knowing, knowing that she probably wouldn't win, but to me the variety is what has given the United States its diverse and also, let's say, peaceful opinions generally, though at the federal level and overseas, the United States has been the international policeman, and that concerns me. What I noticed was the Trump administration did take heed of noting what has been going on in Nigeria with the Boko Harams and the other insecurity issues. The Obama administration, when they brought up there was supposed to be a drone purchase or agreement, and the Obama administration didn't want to arm the drones that they wanted to sell. Things like this we need to be concerned about, because from now on, satellites and drones are going to be part of our life no matter what, all the way down to your smartphone. You can see things instantly that are going on, like in New York, Portland, what happened in Wisconsin. People were making comments almost live. So at the top board, as you say, the United Nations, the AU, who fired the last ambassador to the United States on behalf of the African Union. She went to Fisk and Meharry, which is where my parents went to school, and I met her in Atlanta in her first town hall meeting, and next thing you know, she's not there anymore. It'd be good that we have some stability across the world in all these organizations of concern, including ECOWAS, which the Liberians, which you could say Americo-Liberians, helped write the charter for first the OAU in '63, and then the Liberians took the lead in the ECOWAS treaty. Me living here and being aware of all this internationally, I think we need to go revisit a lot of the policies that we did lay down and did not follow.
Right. I mean, I just want to know the fate of...
Rufai,
Okay.
before you move on, something gives me the impression, John, that you have not quite answered my question.
Oh, okay.
Because I assume in 30 years in Nigeria, you will have witnessed many elections. And now elections are conducted in Nigeria. And many people are shocked that in the run-up to this American elections 2020, we have seen certain things that make it look like, after all, the U.S. is no longer the model for democracy in the world. And I asked you, do you feel embarrassed by that?
Okay, you talking about leader in democracy? Well, I interjected the Electoral College. The popular vote doesn't count. Puerto Rico, Guam, American Samoa, U.S. Virgin Islands, which are ethnic communities, they cannot vote for president today. Even in Washington, D.C., there's a non-voting delegate member to the U.S. House of Representatives. Does not have a floor vote. Taxation without representation. There's a lot more intricacies to correct at that level. And people are just waking up to some of these issues that have been going on. Even D.C. couldn't vote for president until the early 1960s. They had to have an amendment to the Constitution to have 3 electoral votes to be treated as a state as far as Electoral College is concerned. A lot of people were not aware of this at all. I'm hoping that this is a wake-up call to, you say democracies, but according to the United States, it's a republic for which it stands when you say the national, not the national anthem, the Pledge of Allegiance, sorry. I think after this process, we just saw a very volatile fight appointing a new U.S. Supreme Court justice. It was in reverse not too long ago. We know the role that Mitch McConnell and others, Graham of South Carolina and others have played. Participation is the key. That's what I'm happy about. Over 90% of the voting electorate is involved with this election. An unprecedented number of pre-election day ballots were cast, and they're still fighting in the courts over which ones will be counted and which ones may not. If the Electoral College and the 12th Amendment was followed, we're not really supposed to know who's supposed to be president until January 6th, when the secret sealed ballots that are cast in the Electoral College are actually open and counted in a joint session with the existing sitting vice president presiding. Right now, we have a 2-party lock, which some people call a duopoly. And several states have very restrictive laws about even getting ballot access. It's very difficult to get on. If we're talking about free and fair elections, let everybody participate. Why do you have to go get 5% of the last electoral vote count just to get on the ballot? Like for a U.S. House seat in Alabama, I would have had to get about 8,500 signatures just to get on the ballot as an independent, for example, versus joining one of the 2 main parties, which you can just walk in a primary, and if there's no opposition, you get on the ballot. In my district where I vote from in Huntsville, Alabama, the Republican congressman has no opposition from anybody at all. And what kind of participation is that? But everybody's up in arms about the presidential vote, but the House actually runs the country and instructs the president what to do. They have to come and ask the House and Senate how much money they need to function in the various departments.
Okay, John. I mean, those are the imperfections of the union, and that's why, according to you Americans, there's constantly a State of the Union address that the president gives to be able to ascertain the state of the union. itself, which is very imperfect. But I want to talk about something very pertinent along the lines of the issues you've raised. Gerrymandering. Gerrymandering that has constantly skewed along political lines, along the two big parties like the duopoly, like you talked about. Talk to me about that.
Okay. That comes from the census, which is every 10 years. So we just had a census this year, though delayed by COVID, but by 2 years from now, new districts will be redrawn. As you say, gerrymandering, that's a result of probably the previous redlining information where they're keeping certain ethnic groups in certain neighborhoods by economic control. You look at the banking system, and there's very few black banks, for example, or community-oriented banks toward the black community or Hispanic community or other immigrant communities in the various congressional districts or cities in the United States. That process starts in the state level, though the data comes from the federal census officially. The various states could do a census, but they don't. But you've got problems like in Alabama. You've got a 1901 Constitution where the Dixiecrat Democrats established a white supremacy document for forever control of the state of Alabama. It's been amended like 950 times. It's the longest constitution in the world. And racism was enshrined in the document. So you have to go state by state and see how bad the state laws are in this process. And if you've got an institution enshrined by the Constitution, example, state of Alabama, what do you expect out of the redlining and gerrymandering out of a state like Alabama, which only has one black congresswoman based in Tuscaloosa, who I know personally, was in school with my sister, Terry Sewell, and the rest of the congressional districts are Republican controlled. Alabama hasn't got a Democratic elector elected since 1976. Jimmy Carter did it. So you see, also the Dixiecrats joined the Republican Party. In the 1960s, there really wasn't a Republican Party. When my father ran for governor in 1970, he beat the Republican, got almost a third of the vote. But George Wallace, who had just run for president and carried a few states and got 47 electoral votes as an independent in 1968. Since then, the laws have been changed to enshrine the duopoly in almost every state. If, for example, a libertarian or an independent like Ross Perot had actually broke through and carried a state, it would be very, very interesting from then on, because now those laws that were enshrined, to answer your gerrymandering question, would now be busted or at least opened up to another further discussion.
I'll put a fill in front of it and call it filibustered anyway. But thank you so much for that, John.